have been writing a book and I want to read a chapter in the book for you guys, right? So, this chapter is called The Mirror Works Both Ways. A video recently caught my attention. It told the story of a young student who basically kept wiping the mirror. Just kept wiping the mirror because he could see mud on the mirror. And he kept wiping it, but it still looked dirty until his teacher told him to instead wash his face. And when he washed his face, the mirror became clear. And the mud wasn't on the mirror, it was rather on his face. But the mirror was perfectly clear. The lesson was about projection, a psychological defense mechanism first explored in psychoanalytical theory. And projection occurs when we unconsciously attribute our own fears and insecurities and emotions and experiences onto other people. Alongside this, another cognitive process called confirmation bias. It's when our brain forms a belief about someone because it's actually a belief about ourselves. So once our brain forms this belief, it naturally starts searching for ways that prove that and evidence that confirms our belief. So basically, if we think somebody is selfish, we're only going to look at what portrays them to be selfish. They could just be a genuine person who has moments of selfishness, but we won't see that. Whereas if somebody is kind-hearted and they do one selfish thing, we take that one selfish thing and make a whole portrayal of them. The mind is remarkably efficient at protecting the story we create, at protecting that narrative that we create. It's an important lesson to us because it reminds us that we are not always objective observers of realities. Sometimes we create our own realities as a safety mechanism to protect ourselves. We all carry wounds, we carry expectations, we carry beliefs that influence our decisions in our everyday life. It influences our decisions in who we are. We interpret people the way we interpret ourselves. However, I think the lesson becomes incomplete when it is used in every single experience we go through in life. There's a profound psychological difference between prejudice and pattern recognition. Prejudice reaches conclusions before evidence exists, whereas pattern recognition reaches conclusions once evidence is there. One comes from assumption and the other comes from observation. One comes from emotion and the other comes from logic. This distinction becomes especially important when you're speaking about dysfunctional families and relationships. Because with family relationships, unlike any other, we have to experience it in life. We don't choose to be born. We don't choose to go through it, but we have to. We don't choose our parents. Some are dealt with good cards, some are dealt with bad cards. Yeah. We are biologically wired to depend on our parents long before we even could spell the word depend. We aren't capable of evaluating whether they are emotionally healthy people. Developmental psychology has consistently shown that children are formed or born with an automatic attachment to their parents. Whether it's your father who left or your mother who left, you grow up with either what we call mommy issues and daddy issues. Closeness to our parents becomes survival. And when we don't have one parent present, either physically or emotionally or mentally, we tend to always live on survival mode because we feel like everybody's going to do what that person did to us because our parent is supposed to be the one who protects us. So how does it make you feel that when your parent leaves you, somebody who they literally gave birth to, how are you supposed to believe that another person is not just going to leave you? Psychologically, losing a parent can feel more threatening than losing oneself. This is why children raised by emotionally inconsistent, neglectful, and abusive parents often become experts at making excuses for the very people who hurt them, also known as people's pleasers. They don't do it because they're weak. They don't do it because there's something wrong with them. They do it because their brains were designed to preserve attachment. If a parent repeatedly hurts a child, the child rarely concludes, my parent isn't capable of loving me. Instead, the child says, there must be something wrong with me. I need to do better. I need to excel at school. I need to just live my life in order to please my parents, because acceptance and validation from a parent, we believe, makes a child. The belief is actually less frightening, because if the problem is within the child, then perhaps the child can fix it. So we grow up thinking that, okay, we can fix every problem in our parents' lives. And that's not a burden we should take. Perhaps if we're quieter, perhaps if we're more successful, less emotional, keep our mouth shut, be respectful, tolerate hurt, tolerate pain, then we'll finally be the child who deserves their presence. We'll finally be the child who our father, who left for the milk, should come back to. Or our mother, who left us when we were born and abandoned us, will come back to us. Or a sibling who cut us off will come back to us. And that belief shows up in our relationships as we get older, because we start having abandonment issues, or nonchalantness, or avoidance issues, or anxiously attached issues, just to receive the love that we've been craving from our family. The tragedy is that this belief doesn't ever leave us. It follows us into adulthood, into parenthood, into us being in the coffin at this point. We spend years believing that if we can just become enough, our parents will finally become the parents we've always wanted. But what we forget sometimes is that our parents aren't heroes and they aren't villains. They are also people who are going through life for the first time. They've never been a parent before. They've never had kids before. Mind you, some of our parents were kids when they had us. But it doesn't take away the mere fact that what you go through as a parent in your childhood, wouldn't you want to protect your child from that? Why pass it on? In our generation, we speak so much about breaking generational curses. But why didn't our parents do it? Psychologists sometimes describe this as intimate reinforcement, one of the most powerful behavioral conditioning mechanisms that exist. When affection is given consistently, or when affection is given inconsistently rather than consistently, also known as breadcrumbing or love bombing, we tend to become addicted to it. We tend to keep doing more just so we can feel that 1% of affection from a person, because we got so used to it. The uncertainty itself strengthens the attachment. This is the same principle that makes somebody addicted to weed or ecstasy or gambling. You keep putting in more because you expect to get more, but you get satisfied and fulfilled with that 1% that you get back after giving your 100%. You don't know when the reward is coming, which makes you keep trying. In unhealthy family relationships, the reward isn't money, it's love, approval, validation, and affection. Years of emotional neglect can feel like a single compliment being extraordinary. A simple line of your parents saying, "I'm proud of you," can make you fall to your knees and be overfilled with joy, because that is validating you. But the same way you feel like you shouldn't expect validation from a partner, why do you expect validation from your parent? One apology from a parent can outweigh months or even years of hurt, because our nervous system has been conditioned to treasure every small bit of affection and acceptance from them. That is why so many adult children of toxic parents struggle to leave emotionally straining relationships. They're not chasing the parent they had, they are chasing the parent they hoped that they would get. They are grieving someone who was never consistently there, while simultaneously hoping that one day they will finally be. Because hope is the strongest thing. Hope can make us misinterpret history. It can make us believe that the worst person out there is actually the best person for us. It can make us minimize years just because someone gave us a few acts of kindness. It can make us mistake relief for healing. Eventually, when I realized that it changed the way I viewed relationships forever. The apologies always changed. The gifts changed, the words changed, the promises changed, but the patterns never did. It was still the same patterns. Everything felt wonderful until I relaxed and let my guard down and started trusting again. The moment I believed the relationship had finally become safe, everything slowly drifted back to how it was. I barely noticed it until I found myself standing in the exact same position I fought so hard to get myself out of. This is why I believe genuine change is measured differently from temporary remorse. Psychology tells us that lasting remorse and change happens over time. It doesn't just happen overnight. And I feel like so many parents expect you to just drop and forgive just because they apologize, just because they're your parent, just because they changed your diapers. It means that you owe them that forgiveness for scarring you for the rest of your life. Maybe it's a little bit dramatic, but it's true. A genuine remorseful parent understands that trust cannot be demanded and nor can respect. Respect is not given, it is earned. They recognize that healing belongs to the child they hurt. They don't expect one apology to erase years of emotional wounds. They don't overwhelm their child with gifts and kind gestures. They understand that rebuilding trust takes time. One pattern that many describe in the toxic family systems that change often seems to happen only after a child begins to build his life without a parent. Once someone starts depending on someone else or building their own support system, automatically their parents become offended. Like, okay, how dare you go and survive without me? How dare you? Some parents genuinely experience regret. Some mature emotionally, I won't deny that. Some recognize the consequences of their past mistakes and sincerely want to repair the bond. But others just may be doing it out of guilt or the loss of control or wounded pride or desire. What matters is not trying to read someone's mind. What matters is paying attention to what they consistently do over time. Is it healthy to ask questions? Yes, it is. These are questions you should ask your parents. Why now? What's changed? Why did you suddenly wake up one day and decide to be a father? Why did you suddenly come back into my life 20 years later? Why didn't you take accountability before? Why suddenly now you show me affection? Has responsibility accompanied your apology? Has remorse accompanied it? These don't make you bitter. They just make you choose yourself and your own self-worth. Because no title in your life and no blood in your life is worth your self-respect and your self-worth. Many cultures, including many Indian cultures, place enormous emphasis on respecting your parents regardless of what they do. If your parent has to stab you, the community will say, no, you have to forgive because they're your parent. You have to. But no one knows what happens behind closed doors. Often children are taught that because their parents feed them, clothe them, do etc., 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 you owe them a lifelong of gratitude. That's not true because you didn't ask to be born. Gratitude is important, I'll admit that. I'm grateful to my parents for everything they did, but it doesn't excuse the years of trauma I got because of them. And that's the truth, that's a fact. A child can have every material opportunity and still grow up anxious, emotionally neglected, afraid of conflict, terrified of abandonment, and convinced that love must be earned. I mean, I grew up literally knowing how every single footstep in my house sounded and who it belonged to. I grew up pretending to sleep when my dad and my mom came into my room because I didn't want to have a conversation with them. That's how I grew up. Perhaps the hardest truth to accept is that our parents are human beings, as I said. They also have their own unresolved trauma, insecurities, cultural conditioning, emotional limitations. Understanding that does create compassion. I do feel compassion, and so should you. But compassion should never require self-abandonment. You should never abandon yourself just to please somebody else, even if they're your parents. Their trauma may explain their behavior, but it does not erase the impact it had on your life. The frightened child inside of us often wants to believe that understanding why our parents hurt us somehow makes the hurt disappear. But hey, it doesn't. Explanation and accountability are two different things. As children, we often put our parents on pedestals, because our survival depended on believing that adults were heroes. But as adults ourselves, healing often begins where and when we gently take them off those pedestals and see them for neither monsters but nor heroes. They are just imperfect human beings whose actions have real consequences. Imperfect human beings like us who are experiencing life for the first time. We can acknowledge their sacrifices but always acknowledge the scars. We can appreciate the good they give us without allowing the good to erase the harm they cause. The TikTok that I saw initially was right about one thing. Sometimes we mistake our own reflection for reality, but the opposite can also happen. Sometimes we spend years being told that we're too sensitive, too emotional, too disrespectful, too dramatic, too much for remembering things that were done to us, too harsh for not just sweeping things under the carpet and acting like everything is okay. Sometimes this results in us not trusting ourselves altogether, not trusting our own feelings, not trusting our own guts, because we spend years abandoning that side of us. We prioritize somebody else's reality over our own. Wisdom is not believing every suspicion that we have, but it's also not dismissing every concern we have. Wisdom is having the courage to examine the whole picture. The years, the patterns, the inconsistencies, while the consistencies, the accountability, as well as the lived experience. People do deserve the opportunity to change. They do. But trust should never be built on one apology. Trust is built the same way it was broken. Perhaps the most liberating lesson I learned is loving your parents does not require pretending they never hurt you. Forgiving them does not require forgetting what happened. Hoping they change does not require convincing yourself they already have. As much as they were our parents, we were their children. They were entrusted with protecting not only our bodies but also our hearts, our sense of safety, and our understanding of what love was supposed to feel like. When they failed in those responsibilities, acknowledging the truth is not an act of disrespect, it's an act of healing. Because it took two to make us. It took two to break us. It's gonna take two to help us. It doesn't just take us to do it on our own. We can do it on our own. But when we do it on our own, we're seen as bad. We're seen as the child who left, or the child who disrespected their parents, or the child who was rebellious. Never the child who was hurt.